Everyone thinks my story began when my sister spilled red wine on my wedding dress. They are wrong. My story truly began 1 hour later, when I calmly walked past her husband, my brother-in-law Mark, and slipped a small, folded piece of paper into his jacket pocket. No one saw. No one knew. They were all still whispering about the ruined silk and my tear-streaked face. But the tears were gone now. On that tiny piece of paper, I had written 7 words. 7 words that would burn my sister's perfect world to the ground. She came to ruin my day. I was about to ruin her entire life. My name is Joanne Paz, and I am 32 years old. Today was supposed to be the single happiest day of my life. The sun was shining over the beautiful gardens in Napa Valley, California. The man of my dreams, Liam, was waiting for me at the altar, his eyes filled with a love so pure it made my heart ache. I had spent a year planning this perfect day, picking every flower, tasting every cake, and pouring all my savings into a dress that felt like it was spun from moonlight and promises. I felt like a queen. I felt untouchable. I never imagined the person holding the knife to my happiness would be my own sister. Her name is Clara. She is 2 years older than me, and has spent every single one of those years trying to prove she was better. When I got good grades, she had to get better ones. When I got a boyfriend, she had to get a husband. She smiled the brightest when I was failing, and her eyes held a strange, cold fire when I was happy. So when she approached me just before the ceremony, holding a glass of deep red wine, a warning bell went off in my soul. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too bright. "To my little sister," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "May you be as happy as I am." Then, it happened. It wasn't a trip or a stumble. It was a deliberate, graceful tilt of her wrist. The world slowed down. I saw the dark red liquid leave the glass, flying through the air like a terrible, beautiful bird. It landed right on the center of my chest, blooming into a giant, horrific stain on the pure white lace. A collective gasp rose from our family and friends. My mother screamed. Liam started rushing towards me. But I just stood there, frozen, looking at Clara's face. She put a hand to her mouth in fake horror, but I saw it. For one split second, I saw the triumphant, joyful smirk she couldn't hide. She had won. But as I stood there, covered in red wine and humiliation, something inside me did not break. It became hard, like ice. It became sharp, like glass. I looked at the ugly red stain, and I didn't feel sadness. I felt rage. A cold, quiet, and powerful rage that I had never felt before. In that moment, I understood everything. Every mean comment, every stolen opportunity, every little act of sabotage my entire life. It wasn't just jealousy. She hated me. She hated my happiness. And as she rushed forward with napkins, dabbing at the dress and saying, "I'm so sorry, Joanne," I knew I would never forgive her. She thought she was just spilling wine. She was really just spilling the truth. This wasn't just any dress. It was a custom gown from Madame Eloise, a designer so exclusive there was a 5-year waiting list. Clara knew this. She had been with me at the first appointment, her eyes green with envy as Madame Eloise sketched my dream dress. It cost more than a car, a piece of art that represented all my hard work and all my dreams for the future. Destroying it, just minutes before I walked down the aisle, was the cruelest thing she could have possibly done. It was a message, sent loud and clear in front of everyone we loved. Your happiness is worthless. And I received that message. Oh, I truly did. But Clara had forgotten one very important thing about me. I knew my sister. I knew her jealousy. I knew her darkness. And a small part of me had always been waiting for a day like this. 2 months ago, during my final fitting, I had looked at my perfect dress and felt a sudden cold sense of fear. I called Madame Eloise with a strange request. I told her I had a feeling, a terrible premonition. I paid her an insane amount of money to do something she had never done before, to make an exact identical copy of my one-of-a-kind wedding dress. A backup. A secret weapon. While my mother was crying and my bridesmaids were panicking, I simply smiled a tiny, secret smile. It's okay, I whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. I just need a minute. I turned and walked away from the chaos, my head held high, leaving them all standing around the stained symbol of my sister's hatred. I walked into the bridal suite, locked the door, and there it was, hanging in a protected bag, glowing like an angel. The copy. Perfect, pure, and untouched. As I took off the ruined dress, my rage cooled and settled into a calm, clear plan. A plan for a type of revenge so complete, she would never see it coming. That's when I found a pen and a small card from one of the flower arrangements. My hand didn't even shake as I wrote the 7 simple words. Mark isn't the father. Ask Clara. Mark was Clara's husband, a good man who thought he had the perfect wife and the perfect family, including their 1-year-old son, Oliver. I folded the note, tucked it into my sleeve, and put on my new dress. I looked in the mirror. I was no longer a victim. I was a warrior. I walked out of that room, found Mark in the crowd, and as I gave him a quick, sad hug for what happened, my fingers slipped the note right into his pocket. I walked back to the center of the garden, where Clara was still playing the part of the distraught sister. I stood before her, my dress as white as fresh snow. The look on her face was a picture I will treasure until the day I die. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes widened in pure, unfiltered shock and confusion. Her perfect, cruel plan had just gone up in smoke. She looked at me, then at my dress, then back at me, her mind failing to understand what she was seeing. She thought the war was over. But I had just fired the first shot. I don't know what you would have done. Maybe you would have cried. Maybe you would have screamed. But I knew I had to do something more. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you were supposed to trust, please, I am begging you, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss what happens next. You are not alone. And if you have a moment, please comment where you are watching from. I believe that when good people connect, even through a screen, blessings find their way to them and their families. Let's send a wave of strength and goodness out into the world tonight. My sister had no idea what was coming for her. And I promise you, neither will you. Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The color drained from her face, leaving only her bright, ugly jealousy behind. Her eyes darted from my perfectly clean dress back to my calm face, searching for an answer her mind refused to provide. The guests were whispering now, their confusion turning into a low hum of gossip that filled the garden. How is that possible? Did I imagine the wine? Liam rushed to my side, his own face a mix of relief and bewilderment. Joanne, what happened? How did you? He touched the sleeve of my dress, as if to make sure it was real. I just smiled at him, a real smile this time, but my eyes were fixed on my sister. She was watching me, her perfect little world starting to crack. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, and pulled me behind a large oak tree, away from the prying eyes of our guests. What is this? She hissed, her voice low and full of venom. You had another dress? You planned this. Her eyes were wild. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was angry that it didn't work. I pulled my arm away from her, my calm feeling like a superpower. What did you expect, Clara? I said softly. That I would let you ruin the most important day of my life? You've had your fun. Now it's my turn. She looked at me, truly looked at me, and for the first time, she didn't see her weak little sister. She saw a stranger. As we stood there, locked in a silent battle, my eyes drifted across the lawn. I saw him. Mark. Her husband. He was talking to one of his friends, laughing about something. But his hand was in his jacket pocket, fiddling with something small. My breath caught in my throat. Was it the note? Was he just feeling it, or was he about to pull it out? Every second felt like an hour. My heart pounded in my chest, a wild drumbeat of fear and excitement. The whole world seemed to fade away, and all I could see was his hand, resting on the trigger that would blow my sister's life apart. He was so close to discovering the truth. Seeing the familiar look of hate in Clara's eyes sent me tumbling back in time. I was 10 years old again, standing in my backyard in our small Ohio town. It was my birthday party. My dad had just given me the one thing I wanted more than anything in the world, a beautiful porcelain doll with hair like real gold. I was so happy, I felt like my heart could fly. I showed it to all my friends, and for once, I was the center of attention. Clara hated it. She watched from the porch, her arms crossed, as everyone gathered around me and my beautiful new doll. She was supposed to be the special one, always. An hour later, as I was showing my best friend the doll's little shoes, Clara came running over. "Let me see it," she demanded, snatching it from my hands. She held it up, pretending to admire it. Then, she tripped over nothing at all. The doll flew from her hands and shattered on the stone patio, its perfect face breaking into a dozen pieces. I screamed. My friends gasped. Clara immediately started crying, fat tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. It was an accident." My parents rushed over and hugged her, telling me, "It's okay, honey, she didn't mean it. You have to forgive your sister." I never got another doll like that again. Now, standing here at my own wedding, I watched my mother rush over to Clara, fussing over her, trying to calm her down. Not once did my mother come to me, the bride, the one whose dress had just been ruined, and ask if I was okay. It was the same story, just 20 years later. Forgive your sister. Let it go. Be the bigger person. My whole life, I had been the bigger person. I had swallowed her insults, forgiven her betrayals, and cleaned up her messes. But the porcelain doll was one thing. My wedding, my marriage, my entire future. That was something else. I realized then that no one was ever going to stand up for me. I had to do it myself. Suddenly, the gentle music of a string quartet began to play. It was time. The ceremony was starting. My father appeared at my side, his face full of confusion. "Joanne, are you ready?" he asked. I took his arm, my legs feeling strangely steady. As we began the slow walk toward the aisle, my eyes darted back to Mark. He had pulled the little white card from his pocket. He was unfolding it slowly, his brow furrowed as he tried to read my handwriting in the bright sun. The music swelled. My guests stood up, and Mark's eyes finally focused on the 7 words I had written for him. My father was leading me to my future, and behind me, a bomb was about to go off. Walking down that aisle was the strangest experience of my life. In front of me was Liam, my sweet, wonderful Liam, his eyes shining with tears of love. He was my safe place, my future, everything good in the world. But my mind was on the chaos brewing behind me. I could feel the energy in the crowd shift. The whispers were starting again, but this time they weren't about my dress. I knew, without even looking, that people were watching Mark. I tried to focus on Liam, on the vows we were about to make, but it was like I was living in 2 worlds at once. One filled with love and hope, and another filled with a terrible, satisfying revenge. We stood before the minister, hand in hand. I looked into Liam's eyes and said my vows, my voice clear and strong. "I promise to love you, to honor you, to be your partner in all things." As I spoke, I risked a glance out at the crowd. Clara was glaring at me, her face a mask of pure rage. But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at Mark. His face was white. Ghost white. The confusion was gone, replaced by a look of sickening, dawning horror. He was staring at his wife, at Clara, as if he had never seen her before. He knew. He didn't understand how or why, but the seed of doubt had been planted. And I knew it was a seed that would grow into a poison tree. "You may now kiss the bride," the minister said, smiling. Liam leaned in, his hands gently holding my face. This was it. The moment I had dreamed of my entire life. The world was supposed to stop. Fireworks were supposed to go off in my heart. But just as his lips were about to touch mine, a single sharp word cut through the beautiful music and the happy silence. It was a man's voice, raw with pain and anger. "Clara." Every head whipped around. It was Mark. He was on his feet, pointing, his entire body shaking with fury. And in his hand, held up for the whole world to see, was my little white note. Liam's lips were inches from mine, the promise of a new life just a breath away. Then Mark's voice ripped through the perfect moment like a thunderclap. My husband, I could call him that now, pulled back, his eyes wide with confusion. The minister froze, his hand still raised in a blessing. Every single guest, all 100 of them, turned in their seats to stare at the man who had dared to stop a wedding. Mark stood there, a man on fire, his face twisted in a mask of pain. The little white note in his hand looked like a weapon, and in a way it was. It was aimed directly at my sister's heart. Clara, a master of pretending, tried to take control. She let out a nervous little laugh, as if Mark were telling a silly joke. "Mark, honey, what are you doing?" she called out, her voice sickly sweet. "Everyone is looking at you. Please, sit down. We can talk about this later." She tried to wave him off, to dismiss him like a naughty child. She thought her smile and a few soft words could bury the secret forever. She had always been able to fool him, to fool everyone. But as he took his first step toward her, I saw something in his eyes she didn't. Her magic was broken. Her tricks wouldn't work anymore. He didn't run, he stalked. He walked right up the aisle, past my shocked parents, and stopped right in front of the altar. He was so close I could see the sweat on his forehead. He never looked at me. His eyes were only for Clara. He held up the note, his hand shaking with rage. "I'm not sitting down," he said, his voice dangerously quiet now, but everyone could hear him. "What is this, Clara? It says, Mark isn't the father." "Ask Clara." "So I'm asking. What does this lie mean?" The word father hung in the air. The whispers in the crowd turned into loud gasps. The perfect wedding had just become a public trial. My father, a man who hated public scenes more than anything, jumped to his feet. My mother was right behind him. They rushed toward the altar, but not to comfort Mark or to find the truth. They came to put out the fire. "Mark, for heaven's sake, not here," my father hissed, trying to grab his arm. "This is your sister-in-law's wedding. Have some respect." My mother fluttered around Clara, putting a protective arm around her, as if Clara were the victim here. They were doing what they always did, protecting Clara, managing the problem, and pretending the truth wasn't real. They were trying to build a wall around her lie, but the wall was already crumbling. And in the middle of it all, I just stood there, holding my new husband's hand. It was a strange feeling. My world was exploding, my family was falling apart right in front of me, but I felt a deep, chilling calm. It was like watching a storm from behind a thick glass window. I could see the lightning and hear the thunder, but none of it could touch me. I was safe. I looked at Liam, my anchor in the hurricane, and he looked back at me, his eyes full of questions but also full of trust. I squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back. A silent promise. We were a team now. My old family was on its own. Cornered and exposed, Clara did the only thing she knew how to do, attack. Her fake tears started flowing. "He's crazy," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Mark. Then, that finger moved and pointed directly at me. "She did this. Joanne wrote that note. She is a sick, jealous liar, and she's trying to ruin my life. She couldn't stand seeing me happy, so she made up this horrible, horrible lie to hurt me on her own wedding day." My mother looked at me, her face a painting of disappointment and betrayal. For a moment, a seed of doubt was planted in the crowd. Who was telling the truth? The crying sister or the quiet one? Everyone was staring at me, waiting. My father's eyes burned with anger. My mother's were filled with shame. This was my chance to back down, to say it was a terrible joke and try to fix everything. But the thought of it made me sick. I had spent my entire life being quiet. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, and in the sudden silence, my voice came out clear and steady. I looked past my sister and directly at Mark, whose eyes were begging for an answer. "I wrote the note," I said. A wave of gasps went through the crowd. But I did not write a lie. The truth hit the air, and it was devastating. Mark stumbled back like he had been physically hit. His face, which had been angry, was now just broken. He was a man watching his entire life burn down around him. He turned back to Clara, his voice cracking with pain. "Tell me it's not true, Clara," he pleaded. "Just look at me and tell me Oliver is my son." All she had to do was say yes. But she couldn't. She just stood there, sobbing, her mouth opening but no words coming out. And her silence was a louder confession than any words could ever be. She had destroyed him. Just as my father opened his mouth to scream at me, Liam did something amazing. He gently took the microphone from the minister's limp hand. He cleared his throat, and his strong, confident voice echoed through the garden. "Joanne and I are married," he announced. "And our life together starts now. Our real friends are invited to join us at the reception to celebrate. As for the rest of you," he said, his gaze sweeping over my parents, Clara, and Mark, "the show is over. It's time for you to leave." He was choosing me. In front of everyone, he was drawing a line in the sand and standing on my side of it. Stunned silence fell over my family. Liam took my hand, turned his back on them, and started leading me down the aisle, away from the wreckage. We were walking away from the poison, towards our new life. The guests parted for us, their faces a mix of shock and pity. We were almost free. But then I heard my father's voice call out behind us. It wasn't loud or angry. It was weak and trembling, full of a strange sadness. "Clara," he said, his voice cracking. "We should have told him. He deserved to know the truth from the beginning." I froze, my hand tightening on Liam's. What did he just say? We. My father knew. He knew the whole time. My father's words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, like broken glass. We should have told him. Liam and I stopped dead in our tracks. The path to our new life was suddenly blocked by a truth uglier than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just Clara's lie anymore. It was a family secret. A conspiracy. The whispers from our guests died instantly, replaced by a thick, suffocating silence. Everyone was looking at my father now. I stared at his back, at the man who taught me about honesty and integrity. And I felt a cold, terrifying thought creep into my mind. I didn't know this man at all. Mark, who had been crumbling under the weight of one betrayal, now had to carry the weight of 3. He slowly turned from my sister to my father. "You knew." The question was barely a whisper, a puff of air filled with so much pain it made my own chest ache. "Richard, you're my friend. You looked me in the eye when my son was born. You knew. And you said nothing." The accusation wasn't loud or angry. It was worse. It was the sound of a heart being completely and totally shattered. It wasn't just his wife who had lied to him. It was the family he had loved and trusted as his own. My mother, a woman who cared more about appearances than anything else, finally broke. But she didn't rush to comfort Mark. She turned on my father, her face pale with panic and fury. "Richard, stop talking right now," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "You're making everything worse." Her panic wasn't because of the lie. It was because the lie was out in the open. She wasn't trying to fix the damage to Mark's life. She was trying to hide the stain on our family's reputation. And in that moment, seeing her try to silence my father, I knew the answer to my next question. She knew too. They were both in on it. My mind started spinning, desperately trying to make sense of it all. How could my father, the moral compass of our family, be part of something so cruel? And then, a memory came flooding back. It was from about a year ago, just after Oliver was born. I had stopped by my parents' house late one night to pick up a book I had left. As I walked in, I heard them arguing in the kitchen. Their voices were low and urgent. My mother was crying. "I don't know how much longer we can do this," she had sobbed. And my father's voice, firm and full of sorrow, had replied, "We have to. We have to protect her. This will ruin her." At the time, I thought they were talking about Clara's credit card debt or some other mess she had made. I walked in, they stopped talking, and I never thought about it again. But now, those words echoed in my head with a terrible new meaning. We have to protect her. They weren't talking about money. They were talking about this. This giant, life-destroying lie. I remembered my father saying, "It's our burden to carry for her." They weren't just protecting Clara. They were actively lying to Mark, to our whole family, every single day. They were trapping an innocent man in a fake life just to save my sister from her own mistakes. I looked at my parents, standing there by the altar, and I didn't see my mom and dad. I saw two strangers who had spent years lying to my face. I finally understood why Clara was the way she was. She wasn't just the golden child, who was forgiven for everything. She was a monster they had created. They never taught her right from wrong. They just built walls around her, hiding her messes, burying her secrets, and forcing people like me, and now Mark, to pay the price for her sins. She was so confident, so sure she could get away with anything, because she always had. My father looked tired, as if he had been carrying this weight for years and was finally glad to put it down. He ignored my mother and looked straight at Mark, his eyes full of a pathetic kind of pity. "We were wrong, son," he said, his voice heavy with fake regret. "Clara came to us when she was pregnant. She was terrified. The real father. He was not a good person. He was not someone she could build a life with. We thought we were helping. We just wanted to give her, and the baby, a chance at a happy family." The words hung there, creating a brand new, terrifying question. Who was the real father? The phrase, "the real father," seemed to hit Mark harder than anything else. He didn't even look at Clara anymore. He looked at my parents with pure, uncut hatred. "Help her," he choked out, laughing a laugh with no humor in it. "You didn't help her. You used me. You let me fall in love with a child that wasn't mine. You let me build my entire world on a lie you all created. You didn't protect her. You sacrificed me." He wasn't just a husband who had been cheated on. He was the victim of a long, calculated plan. He was a pawn in their sick game. The silence was broken by Liam. He saw I was shaking, on the verge of collapsing. He had seen enough. He strode over to our wedding planner, a woman frozen in professional horror. "This is over," Liam said, his voice low but powerful. "Get them out of here. My wife's family. Get them all out right now." The planner nodded and spoke quietly into her headset. A moment later, two large men in black suits, the security we'd hired for the event, began walking purposefully toward the altar. They were coming to escort my own family out of my wedding. It was the most terrible, and the most wonderful thing I had ever seen. The security guards were gentle but firm. My parents, stunned into silence, didn't resist. Mark just looked empty, like a house that had been burned from the inside out. He simply turned and walked away. But as a guard touched Clara's arm, she looked at me. The tears were gone. The panic was gone. Her face was a mask of pure evil. She walked past me, leaned in close, and whispered 4 sentences that chilled me to the bone. "You think this is a victory? You have no idea who Oliver's real father is. He's much closer than you think. When you find out, you'll wish you had just let me ruin your stupid dress." And with a twisted smile, she let them lead her away, leaving me frozen in place with a new and terrifying poison spreading through my heart. My family was gone, but their ghosts remained. Clara's last words echoed in my ears, a poisonous whisper that was louder than all the music and chatter of our guests. "He's much closer than you think." I stood frozen on the grass, the beautiful California sun feeling cold on my skin. Liam was beside me, his hand on my back, a warm and steady presence. "Joanne? Honey, are you okay? What did she say to you?" he asked, his voice full of concern. I wanted to answer him, to tell him everything, but my tongue felt like lead. My perfect day had been ripped apart, and my cruel sister had managed to leave behind one final bomb, ticking away inside my head. Liam gently guided me toward the reception hall. Walking in felt like stepping onto a stage to play a part one no longer wanted. The room was beautiful, filled with flowers and smiling friends, but it all felt wrong. The air was thick with unspoken questions and pitiful looks. Our guests tried their best to act cheerful, raising their glasses to us as we made our grand entrance, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. They had all been witnesses to the collapse of my family. This wasn't a celebration. It was a party after a funeral. And as I looked at the crowd, I realized I was now standing in a room full of suspects. My mind began to race, turning into a detective at my own wedding. Closer than you think. Who could she mean? My eyes scanned the room, desperately searching for an answer. Was it one of my cousins, standing awkwardly by the cake? Was it Mr. Henderson, my father's old business partner, who had always had a weird soft spot for Clara? My gaze fell upon Liam's groomsmen, all standing together, laughing. These were our closest friends, men who had been in our lives for years. Could one of them be the father of my nephew? The thought made me feel sick. Every familiar, friendly face was now tainted with a terrible possibility. Then, the band started to play our song. It was time for our first dance. Liam led me to the floor and pulled me close. The song was soft and romantic, a promise of a beautiful life together. But as we swayed to the music, I couldn't feel the romance. All I could feel was a cold, creeping dread. Liam must have felt how stiff I was in his arms. He looked down at me, his eyes searching mine. "Joanne, please talk to me," he whispered. "Don't shut me out. Whatever she said, we'll face it together." His words were a lifeline, and I grabbed onto them. I had to tell him. I couldn't carry this alone. As we continued to dance, I leaned in and whispered her exact words into his ear. I felt his body tense against mine. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just held me tighter. I could feel the wheels turning in his head, just as they were in mine. "She's lying," he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She lost, so she's trying to hurt you one last time. Don't let her win. Don't let her poison this day any more than she already has." I knew he was right. I knew that's what I was supposed to do. But I could see it in his eyes. The poison was already spreading. It wasn't just my problem anymore. It was ours. After the dance, Ben, one of Liam's best friends and a groomsman, walked up to us. He was a good guy, always funny and kind, but today he looked nervous. He couldn't seem to look me in the eye. "Hey," he started, shuffling his feet. "What a crazy, crazy day. I'm just really sorry about all that drama, Joanne." His apology felt strange, almost too personal, too guilty. I looked at him, really looked at him, and remembered how Clara always lit up when he was around, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. A horrible, cold thought began to form in my mind. Could it be him? The thought of Ben sent me spiraling into another memory. It was from a family barbecue 2 summers ago. I remembered watching Clara as she flirted openly with Ben, right in front of her husband. She had hung on his every word, touching his arm, her eyes sparkling with a familiar, dangerous light. Mark had been busy at the grill, completely clueless. I had felt a flash of anger and embarrassment for him. I even remembered my father watching the two of them from the porch, a deep frown on his face. I had dismissed it then as just Clara being Clara, always needing to be the center of attention. But now, it seemed like a clue to a crime I never knew had happened. My eyes found Ben again across the crowded room. He was at the bar, ordering a drink. He took a long swallow, his knuckles white as he gripped the glass. He looked over his shoulder, his eyes darting around the room as if he was afraid someone was watching him. He looked exactly like a man who was hiding a terrible secret. My blood ran cold. Was this it? Was this the answer to Clara's riddle? Was the father of my nephew, the man who had helped destroy my sister's marriage, standing right here at my wedding, pretending to be our friend? The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Just as my mind was about to explode with this new possibility, I felt my phone vibrate in the small purse I was carrying. I pulled it out, assuming it was a friend sending their congratulations or asking about the drama. But it wasn't a name I recognized. It was an unknown number. I opened the message, my heart pounding in my chest. There was only one sentence. It read, "Your sister is a liar. But she didn't lie about everything. You need to know the whole truth." I stared at the words on the screen, a new wave of fear and confusion washing over me. Who was this? Who else knew the secret? And what whole truth was I missing? The words on my phone screen seemed to glow, burning into my eyes. You need to know the whole truth. A truth worse than this? What could possibly be worse than a cheating sister, a broken brother-in-law, and parents who had lied for years? I quickly looked up, my eyes darting around the reception hall. The person who sent this message could be anywhere. They could be a guest, a waiter, a member of the band. They could be watching me right now, enjoying the chaos they had just created. Suddenly, the beautiful flower-filled room felt like a cage, and I was a trapped animal being watched by a hidden hunter. I grabbed Liam's arm, my hand trembling, and pushed the phone in front of his face. He read the message, his jaw tightening. A dark cloud passed over his eyes, a mixture of anger and fear. "Who is this?" he whispered, his voice hard. "It's got to be one of Clara's pathetic friends. They're trying to scare you, to ruin our night completely." He was trying to be strong for me, to give us a simple enemy to fight against. But we both knew this felt different. This felt like it was coming from someone who knew more than Clara, someone who held the final piece to this terrible puzzle. My first instinct was to fight back, to do something. My fingers hovered over the screen, ready to type a reply. "Who are you? What do you want?" But the words felt weak and useless. Liam had a better idea. "Call it," he said, his voice firm. "Let's see who has the guts to answer." My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed the call button. I put the phone on speaker, and we both listened as the call connected. It rang once, twice, and then a cold robotic voice filled the silence. "The number you have dialed is not in service." It was a burner phone. A ghost. There was no one to yell at, no one to question. We were completely in the dark. The dead end with the phone call left me feeling helpless, and my mind snapped back to the only suspect I could see, Ben. He was at the bar, laughing with one of the other groomsmen, looking completely normal. Too normal. Was it all an act? The anonymous text had confused things, but Ben was still the most likely answer. The text said Clara was a liar, but didn't lie about everything. Maybe she lied about who the father was to my parents, but the truth was still Ben. My head was spinning with possibilities, each one uglier than the last. I felt like I was drowning, and I didn't know which way was up. Just then, the clinking of a glass pulled me back to reality. It was time for the speeches. Liam's best man, Alex, stood up, beaming at us. He began to tell funny stories about him and Liam growing up, about the first time Liam met me. He was trying so hard to bring joy and normalcy back to our wedding day. Our friends were laughing. But every joke, every happy memory, felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. I sat there, smiling a fake smile, my mind a million miles away. The whole truth, the texter had mentioned, felt like a ticking bomb under our table, and I was the only one who could hear it. Alex continued his speech, his voice full of warmth. "And I'll never forget meeting Joanne for the first time," he said, raising his glass to me. "It was at that crazy New Year's Eve party at her parents' house a couple of years back." The date hit me like a physical blow. That party, a forgotten memory, suddenly became incredibly important. I remembered that night. Clara had been a mess, drinking way too much. And later, I had seen her having a huge, screaming fight with a man in the backyard. My parents had rushed out, pulled her inside, and the whole thing was hushed up and never spoken of again. Could that have been the night? Could that man have been the father? The memory became clearer in my mind. The backyard was dark, lit only by a few string lights. Clara was yelling, her words slurred. The man was yelling back, his voice low and angry. I couldn't see his face. He had his back to me. All I could see was that he was tall and wore a dark coat. My mother had run out, grabbed Clara's arm, and dragged her back into the house. She had given the man a look of pure terror before slamming the door. The next morning, it was like it never happened. My parents said Clara just had too much to drink. Another lie. It was always another lie. Who was that man in the dark? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. Fueled by a desperate need for at least one solid answer, I excused myself from the head table. Liam gave me a worried look, but he let me go. I walked through the crowd, my eyes locked on one person. I was going to ask him. I was going to see his face, watch his eyes, and I would know if he was lying. I was done being a victim in this story. It was time to start getting answers for myself, no matter how much they might hurt. I reached the bar and stood directly in front of Ben. He turned, a friendly smile on his face. "Joanne, hey. You need a drink after all this." His smile faded when he saw the look on my face. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "Ben, I have to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the absolute truth." He looked confused. "Okay." I took a deep breath. "Were you at my parents' New Year's party 2 years ago?" He stared at me, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "The New Year's party? No, of course not. That was the weekend Liam and I went to Vegas, remember? We almost missed our flight back." He was telling the truth. I could feel it. My whole theory fell to pieces. It wasn't him. My phone vibrated in my hand. My heart leaped into my throat. It was the ghost again. I opened the message, my hands shaking so badly I could barely read it. The words made the air leave my lungs. "Stop looking at the groomsmen. You're wasting your time. The father was standing at the altar with you." I froze, my blood turning to ice. I replayed the scene in my mind. The men standing at the altar. There was the minister, an old man I barely knew. There was Liam, my husband. And there was my own father. The message could only mean one of 3 things, and every single one of them was impossible. Every single one of them was a nightmare. My phone felt like a block of ice in my hand. The message burned behind my eyes. The father was standing at the altar with you. My mind, already spinning, came to a dead stop. I felt the blood drain from my face as I mentally pictured the scene from just a few hours ago. Standing at the altar under the beautiful arch of flowers had been 3 men. Pastor Mike, our kind, elderly minister. My father, who had walked me down the aisle. And Liam, the man I had just promised my life to. The anonymous messenger wasn't giving me a clue. They were handing me a cup of poison and telling me to drink. My brain tried to fight back, to find a way out of this nightmare. Pastor Mike. The thought was insane. He was almost 70 years old and had known me since I was a little girl. He was a sweet old man who smelled like peppermints and old books. It was impossible, unthinkable. It had to be a cruel joke. I threw that possibility away. It was too ridiculous to even consider. But when I threw it away, I was left with only 2 other names. And they were not ridiculous. They were monstrous. My father. And my new husband, Liam. I looked across the room, through the dancing couples and smiling faces, and my eyes landed on Liam. He was talking to his best man, Alex, a worried frown on his face as he occasionally glanced over at me. My husband. My partner. The one good, solid thing in my life. And for the first time, a tiny dark seed of doubt began to sprout in my heart. Had he known Clara before he met me? Was their meeting a setup? Was our whole love story built on a secret even bigger and uglier than Clara's? I felt sick with guilt for even thinking it, but the thought was there, planted by a ghost with a cell phone. Then, my mind turned to the other name. The one that felt like breaking a law of nature just by thinking it. My father. A wave of nausea so strong I had to grab the bar to keep from falling. My own father. The man who was supposed to protect me, to be my hero. The thought was so vile, so fundamentally wrong, it felt like my brain was rejecting it. But then I remembered his words at the altar, after Mark had exposed the secret. We should have told him. Not she should have told him. We. The words suddenly felt heavy, full of personal guilt and a shared secret that was darker than I could ever have imagined. I stumbled away from the bar, desperate for a quiet place to breathe. I found myself in an empty hallway near the coat check. Leaning against the cool wall, a forgotten memory came rushing back. It was from years ago, right after I got home from college. I walked into the house and heard Clara and my father in the middle of a huge fight in his study. Clara was sobbing, screaming at him, "You're ruining my life." I had never heard her sound so desperate. And my father, his voice dangerously quiet, had replied, "No, Clara. You are ruining mine." At the time, I assumed she had crashed his car or maxed out his credit cards again. It was always something with Clara. I had quietly backed away, not wanting to get in the middle of it. But now, remembering the look on my father's face later that day, it wasn't the look of a parent angry about money. It was a look of deep, soul-crushing shame. He looked like a man trapped in a prison of his own making. Was that the prison? Was that the terrible secret that had been eating him alive all these years? The thought was so horrific it almost brought me to my knees. If it were true, then my parents' constant protection of Clara, their willingness to lie and destroy another man's life to save her. It all made a sick, twisted kind of sense. It wasn't just a father protecting his favorite child. It was a guilty man trying to hide his own unforgivable sin. And Oliver, my sweet little nephew with his big brown eyes. If my father was his father, what did that make him? My half-brother? I doubled over, my stomach churning, feeling like I was going to be physically sick right there in the hallway. "Joanne? Are you okay?" Liam's voice cut through my haze. He was standing at the end of the hall, his face etched with worry. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I had. I had seen the ghost of my entire childhood, the ghost of the family I thought I knew. I wanted to tell him everything, to share this disgusting burden, but I couldn't. How could I say those words out loud? How could I accuse my own father of something so monstrous? I just shook my head. "I don't feel good, Liam," I whispered. I think I need to leave." Liam didn't ask any questions. He simply nodded, his eyes full of a deep, sad understanding. He knew this day had been stolen from us. We left our own wedding reception before we even cut the cake. As we walked out, I felt the pitying stares of our friends, and it felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. In the car, on the way to our hotel, I was silent. My mind was racing. I couldn't live in this darkness, with these terrible questions eating me alive. I needed the truth. Not from a mysterious text, not from a liar like my sister. I needed scientific, undeniable proof. And a desperate, crazy plan began to form in my mind. Later that night, in the quiet of our hotel suite, I waited until Liam's breathing was deep and even. He was asleep. I slipped out of bed, my movements slow and silent. I went to the closet where his wedding suit was hanging. A few weeks ago, his barber had collected the stray hairs from his pre-wedding trim and put them in a small envelope for good luck. It was a silly tradition, but now it was everything. I took the envelope. I sat down with my laptop and typed, "Secret paternity test for a child and potential uncle." Then I stopped, deleted the words, and typed something new. "Secret paternity test for a child and potential grandfather." My phone screen lit up on the nightstand. A new text. Just 6 words. "He has your eyes, doesn't he?" The last text message from the ghost was the cruelest of all. "He has your eyes, doesn't he?" I stared at the words, my mind splitting into 2 horrible paths. He was obviously Oliver. But who did your mean? Did the texter mean Oliver had my eyes, the dark brown eyes of the Paz family, the same eyes as my father? The implication was so vile it made me want to smash the phone against the wall. Or was the texter playing a different game? Did they know I was with Liam, And they meant Oliver had your husband's eyes? Both possibilities were a special kind of hell, and the ghost was letting me choose which one to live in. The next morning, the sun streamed into our hotel room, bright and cheerful, a complete mockery of how I felt inside. This was supposed to be the first morning of the rest of our lives, the start of our honeymoon. Liam woke up and smiled, pulling me close for a kiss. I had to force myself not to flinch. I kissed him back, but my mind was screaming. How could I act like a happy newlywed when every touch, every look, was now filtered through a lens of suspicion? I felt like the worst person in the world, doubting the one man who had stood by me, but Clara's poison and the ghost's words had infected everything. I knew I couldn't live like this. The not knowing was a torture that would drive me insane. The DNA test was the only path to the truth. In my purse were 2 small plastic bags. One held the strands of hair from Liam's suit. The other was still empty, waiting for a sample from my father. The biggest challenge, I knew, would be getting a sample from Oliver. My family was a war zone. How could I possibly get close to my nephew now? We were supposed to be on a plane to Hawaii in a few hours. I had to act fast. I needed a plan. I turned to Liam, my face arranged into a mask of frantic apology. Liam, I am so stupid, I said, trying to sound convincing. I don't know how I could have done this, but I think I left my passport at my parents' house. We have to go back. I am so sorry. It was a clumsy lie, but it was the best I could come up with. He looked at me, his expression a mix of frustration and pity. The last thing he wanted was to go anywhere near my family. Are you sure, Joanne? He asked. But seeing the panicked look in my eyes, he sighed. Okay, let's go. We'll be quick. The drive back to my childhood home was the quietest car ride of my life. The silence was heavy with everything that had happened yesterday. As we drove, a memory from when Oliver was born floated to the surface of my mind. I was at the hospital, holding my new nephew for the first time. I remembered Mark standing beside me, looking down at his son with so much love it hurt. He's perfect, he had said quietly. But he doesn't look a thing like me, does he? He must get his looks from Clara's side of the family. I had laughed. But then I remembered seeing my father. He was standing in the corner of the room, his face pale and sick, looking like he was about to faint. He couldn't even look at the baby. We pulled up to my parents' house. The curtains were drawn. It looked empty and sad. I'll be right back, I told Liam, my heart pounding. I ran inside, using my old key. The house was dead silent. I went straight to my parents' bathroom, my feet not making a sound on the carpet. I grabbed my father's hairbrush from the counter. My hands shook as I pulled a few grey strands from the bristles and sealed them in the second plastic bag. I felt like a thief, a spy in the ruins of my own family. I had what I needed from here. Now for the hardest part. I think I left my old laptop at Mark and Clara's house too, with some work files on it. I lied again, hating myself with every word. Can we please just swing by? It's on the way. Liam agreed, his patience clearly wearing thin. My mind raced as we drove the few blocks to my sister's house. What would I find? Would Clara even let me in? Would I be able to get what I needed? My entire future felt like it rested on the next 10 minutes. As we pulled onto her street, I saw Mark's car in the driveway, but Clara's was gone. This was my chance. Mark answered the door. He looked like he had aged 10 years in one day. His eyes were red and swollen, and his face was a grey mask of grief. He let me in without a word. The house was a disaster. Toys were everywhere, dishes were piled in the sink, and in the middle of the living room, Oliver was asleep in his playpen. She's gone, Mark said, his voice hollow and empty. Packed a bag this morning while I was in the shower. Just left. My heart broke for him, but a selfish part of me felt a flicker of opportunity. With Clara gone, this would be easier. I did my best to comfort him, offering him a glass of water, telling him how sorry I was for everything. While his back was turned in the kitchen, I saw it. On the coffee table, next to a baby bottle, was Oliver's pacifier. It was perfect. Saliva held just as much DNA as hair. My hands were shaking, my heart beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached for it, my fingers just inches away from the truth. I was so close. "The police were here this morning, Joanne," Mark said, his voice suddenly cutting through the silence from the kitchen doorway. I froze, my hand hovering in the air. He walked back into the room, his face dark with a new kind of worry. "They came to ask about Clara," he said, his voice low. I stared at him, my mind unable to process his words. The police? Why would the police be looking for Clara? "They weren't asking about the baby, or about me," he continued, his eyes finding mine. "They were asking questions about the man she was seeing. The man they think might be Oliver's real father." He took a shaky breath. "They said he might be dangerous." The world tilted. The simple, ugly story of a family lie had just twisted into something dark and dangerous. My hand, which had been reaching for the pacifier, froze in mid-air. "The police," I repeated, my voice a hollow echo of his. Why are the police involved?" Mark sank onto the couch, his face buried in his hands. The pieces of the puzzle in my head were shifting, rearranging themselves into a picture I didn't recognize, a picture full of shadows and threats I had never imagined. This wasn't just about my sister's cheating anymore. It was about her choice of partner. A man the police were looking for. "They didn't tell me everything," Mark said, his voice muffled by his hands. "They just said they had reason to believe the man Clara was involved with has a criminal record. They said he might be unstable. They asked if I knew where she was, if she was safe." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear, a fear that was for Clara. "They think she might be in trouble, Joanne." My heart, which had been so full of anger towards my sister, suddenly felt a pang of terror. What kind of mess had she gotten herself into? My mind instantly went to my parents. Their frantic, desperate need to protect Clara, to hide her secret at all costs, suddenly looked completely different. I had seen them as villains, enabling their favorite daughter. But what if I was wrong? What if they weren't protecting her from shame? What if they were protecting her from him? Were they afraid of this man? Had he threatened them? The idea that my parents might not be monsters, but victims, was almost more confusing. It turned the whole story upside down, leaving me with no one to blame and nowhere to stand. This new, terrifying information made one thing crystal clear. I had to know who this man was. The DNA test was no longer just about getting revenge or finding the truth for Mark. It was about protecting Oliver. It was about understanding the danger my sister, and maybe my whole family, was in. While Mark stared blankly at the wall, lost in his own nightmare, I moved. I walked to the coffee table and began to tidy up the baby bottles and toys, a gesture of fake helpfulness. My hand closed around the small, wet pacifier. With my back to him, I quickly slipped it into the plastic bag in my pocket. The evidence was secured. But I felt no victory, only a cold, heavy dread. I told Mark I had to go, that my husband was waiting. I gave him a quick, awkward hug and promised to call him. Walking out of that house and back to the car felt like crossing a border into another country. In that house was a world of crime and danger and fear. In the car was Liam, and the normal world we were supposed to be living in. I got into the passenger seat, the little plastic bag feeling like a heavy stone in my pocket. The weight of all the secrets I was now carrying felt like it was going to crush me. "Did you get your laptop?" Liam asked as I buckled my seatbelt. He was trying to be patient, but I could see the stress around his eyes. He just wanted to get on a plane and leave all of this behind. "Yes," I lied, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Got it. We can go to the airport now." The lie was so much bigger now. I wasn't just hiding a DNA test from him anymore. I was hiding the police. I was hiding a dangerous, unknown man. On the second day of our marriage, I was already building a wall of secrets between us, brick by painful brick. As Liam drove us toward the airport, another memory hit me. It was from a few years ago. I had come home to visit, and my father and Clara were in the middle of a screaming match. "He is not the right man for you, Clara," my father had yelled, his face red with a fury I had rarely seen. "This man will destroy you." And Clara, defiant as always, had screamed back, "You can't control my life. You don't know anything about him." At the time, I thought it was just a typical dramatic fight over some new boyfriend. But now, it sounded like a warning. A specific, terrified warning. My father knew something about that man, even back then. We finally made it to the airport, the last stop before our escape to a fake paradise in Hawaii. As I put my carry-on bag onto the security belt, my eyes caught the headline of a newspaper sitting on a nearby chair. "Local businessman vanishes amid fraud allegations." I glanced at the grainy photo of a man in a suit. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. I dismissed it, my mind too crowded with my own problems to care about some strangers. I just wanted to get on the plane and run away from everything. We were sitting at the gate, our flight to Hawaii just starting to board. This was it. The point of no return. I could get on that plane, try to forget everything, and live in the dark. Or I could face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. My phone vibrated. The ghost was back. The message made my blood run cold. "You have the samples. Good. Be careful. The man you're looking for is not just dangerous. He's desperate. And he knows that people are looking for him." He knew I had the samples. The thought that this person was tracking my every move was terrifying. Before I could even process the warning, a second message came through. It wasn't text this time. It was a web link. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely press the screen. The link opened to a news article online. It was the same story I had seen on the newspaper. Local businessman vanishes amid fraud allegations. But the picture online was much clearer, a professional headshot. I stared at the face of the missing, dangerous man wanted by the police. And the air left my lungs. My world stopped. I knew him. It was Mr. Henderson, my father's best friend. The face of Mr. Henderson, my father's best friend, stared back at me from the screen of my phone. He was the smiling man who came for dinner every Sunday, the man who gave me a graduation present, the man I called Uncle Ron. And he was a criminal on the run, a dangerous man, and the father of my sister's child. The pieces of the puzzle didn't just fall into place. They slammed together with the force of a car crash. The lies, the fear, the secrecy, it all made a terrible, perfect sense. He was the man in the dark coat from the New Year's party. He was the reason my parents lived in a state of quiet panic. Liam saw the look on my face and took the phone from my trembling hands. He stared at the picture, then back at me, his eyes wide with shock and understanding. "Our flight is boarding," a voice announced over the loudspeaker. But we both knew we weren't getting on that plane. Our honeymoon to paradise was a fantasy. Our real life, the one filled with ugly truths and broken people, was waiting for us back home. Without a word, we stood up, turned our backs on the gate to Hawaii, and walked out of the airport. We weren't running away anymore. We were walking back into the storm, but this time, we were walking together. We drove straight to my parents' house. I walked in, my husband at my side, and found them sitting in the dark living room like two ghosts. My mother had been crying. My father just looked old and defeated. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just placed my phone on the coffee table, the news article with Mr. Henderson's face glowing in the dark. "It was him, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice flat and empty. All this time it was Ron. My father let out a long, shuddering breath, the sound of a man who had been holding it in for years. He nodded, his eyes closing in shame. "Yes," he whispered. "It was always Ron." And then, the whole story came pouring out. It wasn't a simple affair. Ron had been losing his business, getting involved in illegal things. He became controlling, threatening. Clara had been trapped, terrified of what he would do if she left him. The baby wasn't an act of love. It was an anchor he used to keep her tied to him. My parents, paralyzed by fear, came up with the plan. They pushed Clara toward Mark, a good, stable man, thinking they could build a new, safe life for her and Oliver, a life where Ron couldn't touch them. They weren't protecting a favorite child. They were trying to save their daughter from a monster they had let into their home. But why didn't you go to the police? I cried, the question I couldn't understand. My mother finally spoke, her voice thick with tears. He had proof, Joanne, she sobbed. Proof that your father knew about his business deals. He threatened to ruin us, to send your father to jail right along with him. We were trapped. We saw no way out. Then she looked at me, her eyes holding a strange new light. I saw how you stood up at the wedding, she said. You were so strong. You didn't cry or fall apart. You fought back. And I knew you were the only one strong enough to end this. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I asked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, cheap-looking phone. A burner phone. I sent the texts, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I had to. I knew you wouldn't stop until you found the truth. I couldn't say it myself, I was too afraid, but I could guide you. I knew you would bring it all into the light. It wasn't a ghost who had been texting me. It was my own mother, a desperate woman trying to find a hero in her own daughter. I was her secret weapon. In that moment, everything shifted. The rage I had felt for my family began to dissolve, replaced by a deep, aching pity. They weren't villains. They were just scared people who had made terrible choices. I reached into my purse and pulled out the 3 small plastic bags. I put the one with Liam's hair back in my purse. I put the bag with my father's hair on the table. Then I held up the bag with Oliver's pacifier. I was going to run a test, I said. But I don't need to anymore. We all know the truth. I looked at my father. But Mark deserves to know for sure. And he deserves his freedom. A few weeks later, the official results came back. Ron Henderson was Oliver's father. Mark had the proof he needed to start his life over, free from the lies. The news reported that Clara and Ron had been found in a different state. He was arrested for fraud, and Clara faced charges for her part in his crimes. Justice, messy and painful, had finally arrived. My relationship with my parents was broken, but for the first time, we were speaking the truth. Healing would be a long, slow journey, but it was a journey we could now begin. Liam and I never went to Hawaii. Instead, we had our honeymoon at home, rebuilding our lives from the rubble. One sunny afternoon, he took me to a quiet park. He pulled me close and said, I married you for better or for worse. I guess we just got the worse out of the way early. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh for the first time in what felt like forever. I realized my secret weapon wasn't the second dress. It was the truth. And my revenge wasn't destroying my sister's life. It was building my own, honest and strong, from the ground up. My story started with a stain on a white dress, but it ended with the truth coming clean. If you've ever felt trapped by a family secret, or betrayed by someone you love, know that you are not alone, and you have the strength to find your own truth. This story is for you. Please, if it touched your heart, like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By joining our community, you are sending a message that the truth matters, and that we are all stronger when we face it together. Thank you for watching.